Hello, everyone. Yes, we're having a little chat here because some people had a hard time getting on. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, so just making a few comments about the past, especially the very last one, the Nature of Darkness Part 2. Some of you were there, some of you weren't there, some of you may have listened to the recording. I realized that I never sent the forum link out. There is a forum with the previous two parts. It's in the Sacred Self-Healing Forum. And I will do this with the recording here for part 3. Yeah, the forum link. I will post this with the recording for part 3 because here I just explained this to some of you already. I am really getting into it, guys. I'm really connecting the dots for you. Why have I been talking about aliens along with mastering your choice, mastering your will, mastering your body, and understanding the nature of darkness? Because they are linked. And this has a lot to do with understanding current energies, with understanding what is actually going on in our societies right now. Yeah, why we're even feeling this unease in us. Yeah, like in regard to, you know, our bodies, in regard to our psyche, in regard to our energetic sensitivity, perhaps in regard to spirituality, and in regard to, you know, the health of the planet and all this. What is all this explained or viewed through the lens of spiritual science? What is the bigger cosmic stuff that is going on here? And so many of you have either, you know, a religious or an intuitive understanding of, you know, something like the battle in heaven, you know, this sort of the dark forces and the light forces. I mean, it doesn't really matter what movie you watch nowadays, even if you're not into fantasy, science fiction, there always is this battle between dark and light. And I wanted to dive a little bit into this before we get more into the deeper sort of spiritual science of things. What does this battle of dark and light even mean to you? How do you see this? What is darkness for you? Who wants to start breaking the ice here? What is darkness for you? And any kind of perception is what we want to discuss here. So there's no right or wrong. Okay, never feel this. That's why these sacred self-healing workshops are called workshops. That we're working things out together, we're exchanging. Yeah, and as we are saying it out loud and sharing, we are developing, we're working it. Go ahead.
For me, darkness is not knowing or sort of ignorance.
Okay, I like that. Not knowing. Yeah. What is it that you or humans, I mean, you, Linda, you're representative of humans here, you know, what is it that humans want to know, that they feel that they're in the dark in?
I think even though I know I shouldn't need to know, but I feel like I need to know that I'm going to be safe. So I guess future comfort.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty understandable, and it's valid. It's something that can get to all of us, right? I mean, to some of us more than others, and this is maybe something that we need to investigate. Yeah, why are some people so terrified of what may be or what might be, and others aren't. I mean, you said something you know you shouldn't be. Why do you say that? I mean,
I
I find
guess
it
the
pretty human.
experience of when I trust and I reflect back, I know things are going to turn out. But then I, I I find myself getting caught up in still wanting to know ahead of time that I'm going to be safe.
Yeah. Okay. So we are going to do a typical investigation, like we always do this here with Sacred Self Healing. Okay. And don't find this nitpicky. We are investigating what we're perceiving. In other words, we need to look into what we're actually saying, because what we're saying reflects part of what we think, what we feel, and our attitude. So you say feel safe. Okay, feel safe. We all have a certain association with feeling safe, but let's define this a little bit more. Not just you, Linda, anybody here. What does feeling safe mean to us? Safe on what level? Safe that you survive life, safe as in feeling good, feeling taken care of. Yeah, is it more like a feeling? Is it more like a physical safety? Is it more a spiritual, emotional safety? Or is it more feeling safe as in, well, I don't know. I mean, perhaps also what comes after us. I mean, there's different levels of safety. If I told you in 50 years from now, 50 years from now, the world is going to go under, neither of us is going to be alive at that point, most likely. Maybe one of you. So let's say 80 years. And 80 years from now, we're all going to be gone physically. What's that going to do for you? How would that change the outlook on your life?
I I feel, well, there were a lot of things that came up with this question, but in this safety question specifically, two things come to me is that one, I don't mean to put anybody down here, but worrying about being safe is a bit of a darkness. And that I think my sense of safety would be that I'm facing my own dark challenges and shadows and things like that to stay connected with the light. I think any time that I've felt the worst and that's inspired me to do anything is when I was had the thought that I would be disconnected from the light, from my source, from the celestial, that that I'd done something wrong. That's my
All
safety
right.
right
So
now.
I heard you define safety in the spiritual sense. Yeah. It's a form of spiritual safety. Yeah, maybe that your soul is safe, or that your consciousness, a connection with the light, you said.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would
So
be
that's a spiritual
spiritual.
safety. Yeah. So there's no need to compare that with other forms or other desires for safety, because we are, after all, very complex beings, and we can perceive ourselves on these, well, at least, how I present this on these 5 different levels, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, energetically. And so for you, it's more sort of here in this area. Yeah, something like
And
that.
two, like with all of this, I have come to, it's given me the clarity too, though, I have to say, with that, is to be able to be conscious and bring what I feel is a sense of responsible safety to myself and my existence in this world too. And
So is that a
be,
remedy already? Is that a remedy right there? In a
I
way?
have to,
I mean,
I
when you
have to
bring,
say that. that
Yeah.
I've been able to like sometimes slow down my process of living to go, okay, what's the next best step now, rather than super leaping into what I usually would leap into and not be able to really consider it with my feelings a little bit wider. So I feel like I've developed an ability to at least understand something I'm getting into a little bit more, and
Okay.
avoid situations that are, I'm just going, no, I'm not going to like be
So
like a
these are all
hero.
measures to mitigate
Yeah,
the
yeah,
fear of the unknown, right? So those
yeah.
are remedies already,
To
right?
give a feeling
Yeah.
of safety then. Yeah.
Hmm. So stepping in, you found out in the course of your journey that, stepping into self-responsibility and, as you called it, like stepping back and looking at the bigger picture of things, that those are things that help you to feel safe. But
Yeah.
your main goal, though, Janet, just to and again, there's not a comparison, is your main concern is the safety in regard to like a those are spiritual values. Yeah, connectedness,
Mhm.
your consciousness, your soul, those are all spiritual values.
I would
Yeah.
put that as a priority, I think, in often choices
Hmm.
or decisions I'm
And
making.
that's
Yeah.
very good that you know that. And that's why I'm asking these questions. Yeah, because we need to know what it actually is that makes us feel unsafe. Yeah, on what level and where we want to go. So sometimes you will find out that you want one thing, but you're more concerned about another thing. So these priorities, they don't always match up with our values. Yeah, or let's say the amount of time that we are pondering about something, yeah, can also be off. Yeah, so this is the first thing that we want to align. We want to align, what is really important to us, and there's no better or worse. The numbering here is just a numbering in, to name it, to refer to it. But if your value is a spiritual value and your concern are of spiritual nature, then that's aligned. Okay, and you went a step further and already shared some things that are helping you to work with that fear of the unknown. Okay, namely by stepping into it and sort of taking the time to investigate it and to become more self-aware, of what each of your choices brings, as far as like the consequences is concerned, pertaining your spiritual safety. Yeah. So I would say in a nutshell, Janet, losing your soul will probably be the biggest fear that you have.
I guess so. I mean, like
Will
if we're
always
talking about the
amplify.
nature of darkness, then the fear of it, I do have memory of being like kind of jump started into like, oh my God, I want to stay awake. I want to stay. But it's like it's a particular feeling. Don't even think the word "stay connected" defines it well enough. It's just like this little wake up thing that was said, that without words, that's the important thing in life. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So, Linda, may I come back to you and anybody else here? But I wanted to give you an opportunity now that we're starting to discuss this a little bit. Feeling safe. Yeah, we're defining what does feeling safe mean to you. Yeah. How this now sort of fits in for you. What is that you want to know that you're safe? That was a statement that you made, and we can all relate to that. We all want the same. On what level do you see yourself here in regard to what kind of safety is the most important for you?
For me, it's the emotional, psychological heart.
Okay. So give us a little bit of a feeling for this. Like,
I guess the feeling safe would be about understanding or knowing or feeling the support or a connection. I guess
Okay.
maybe human connection.
Connection is nice. Yeah, yeah, and it's maybe a little more than just the emotional, psychological, but you do value that. So it's the support system that you have around you in form of other people, community, perhaps belonging. Is that what you're referring this to?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is well placed. And now that you're saying it out loud that way, you, you absolutely felt very congruent. You can subscribe to this. You can say, yeah, this is what I'm in for. This is what I'm going for. This is the most important thing for me. And when there are any kind of fears that are coming up in me, then they always have to do with that. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, that just feels like it fits. I just feel like I settle right into that.
Okay, nice. Okay. What does feeling safe mean for anybody else here? Julianne, you're commenting here. Darkness is what disconnects you from your center.
Yeah, so, and that feeling safe is when I don't feel like I'm in my center, when I feel discombobulated, and then that gives me a moment to come back, like to realize that something's off. And
okay, what's so
to come
bad
back to
about not being in your center? I mean, just to get to make this a little more life here for all of us.
If I'm not in my center, then I'm out in my, I could be more reactive, or it's sort of like being in my ego consciousness of my mind starts to loop. I can think things in one direction and spin off into that, into something, and maybe in error perceptions, and react. And not being in my center means that I have been taken out by something outside of me.
Mm-hmm. Your energy kind of spiked up when you said error perceptions. Like what I heard was illusions. What I was heard, you said your mind starts looping, and
The minefield sort
yes,
of thing.
yes,
Like it,
the mind becomes a minefield. Yes, so
and
we're
I'm just discombobulated, right? And then it sends me into a spin, and I could take me into anxiety or wanting to shut down or whatever
any lower state
coping mechanism. Yeah,
any lower
that I
state.
can.
But what I hear you say is that you're mostly concerned about your etheric safety. Okay, because when that gets, you use the word discombobulated, so somehow interfered with or somehow off, all right, your mind takes over. Yeah, and
yes, it can very quickly.
And you can no longer trust in your perceptions. You start going into this, not knowing anymore what's true.
And a way to remedy that is I can come back, take a breath, and this knowingness that I am more than my fears, that those, when I'm trapped there, I can see that these are just fears, or the anxiety is just my mentalness and my mind, and that can help me take another step.
So you take the time as a remedy, similar to what Janet said. You take the time to settle in your body, so that's very specific. You take a breath, that is a very physical action. Yeah, focusing on your breath is like really going into the most fundamental sort of autonomous nervous system function, or vegetative nervous function, where you just rely on your body functioning. Yeah, and there you can feel something. I'm translating right now, something like a grounding, and that helps you then to mitigate this mental confusion. Yeah, just the confusion about what is and what isn't, and what you should believe in or what you should not, but you know, these kind of things.
Mm.
So for you, feeling safe is mostly, that's just you saying this, being unaware, but I can reflect this back to you. Yeah, it's mostly about your search. Yeah, because any kind of, as you call it, discombobulation, yeah, that could drive you into no longer being able to master your will or to master your body or, you know, any of these things, yeah, would in your case express as, you know, this mental thing, yeah, this mental combobulation, the constructs, the illusions, yeah. It's always, it's never really just one, but I just want to show you something. I want you to use this opportunity to reflect on your own fears a little more, yeah, because there is something here with our fears that can inform us about where we have most of our guards, where we have most of our darkness too, yeah, because if that is where our fears are located, then that is also, that's how you need to understand darkness, where it can hit us the hardest, yeah, where it can sort of go straight to your core, yeah, what makes you not feel safe. And again, feeling safe is a subjective experience. What makes you feel unsafe, not safe, okay, is that which you align yourself to, that which you take as sort of part of your identity, as your aliveness. Now just follow this sort of train of thoughts and feelings that I am sending you on right now. Yeah, understand that where you feel the most vulnerable is what you value the highest. Yeah, what you are most afraid of losing. And when it comes to dark forces, or let's not personify it right now, okay, just, you know, this darkness element, yeah, then it will always attack you there first. Who of us is the most afraid of losing their physicality, their body? Go ahead. So am I getting this right now? The silence. Nobody here is afraid of dying and losing their physicality, maybe even just the control of their physicality, be it aging, be it not being able to do certain physical things anymore, not being able to experience certain physical things anymore. Nobody here afraid of that?
I'm not looking forward to it as I age.
Mm-hmm. How do you process that? You're not looking
Well,
forward to it, but
I'm just in acceptance that this is part of the cycle of life. And then when I know that I am not just my body, that this is just natural and I'm okay with it, I suppose.
okay, so that's your
It's
remedy. Your remedy is a
Mm.
certain level of, actually, Elena mentioned this at the beginning, trust. Yeah, that you know, however you contextualize this, but that is okay. That is okay. I mean, like you said, you're not looking forward to it because you know that there's maybe inconvenience and discomfort that comes with this, but that's not your main concern. Is that fair to say it that way?
That's correct, yeah.
Andrea, are you saying here in the chat that you're totally afraid of dying and you worry about your body all the time? And that's totally understandable. Those are the different expressions, because we experience ourselves on these different levels of being. Yeah, and we all have a different attachment, say. Yeah, some of us have the attachment to the body, others have the attachment to the emotional, yeah, to, you know, everything that has to do with, you know, how we feel, yeah, the emotions that we experience. Others have the attachment to the mental, yeah, the way we construct things, the way we want to see things as well. Yeah, so the mental is one of those areas, especially nowadays, where a lot of people try to find refuge by just simply reframing things, by just simply sort of justifying things. And for as long as the mental is okay, they feel okay, for as long as there is no inner conflict. Yeah. By the way, in the study group here in a little bit, in an hour and a half, I'm going to talk about that in specific. Then there's those of us who are very attached to the spiritual, the beliefs around it. So, for example, a strong religion, a strong a kind of contextualization of you know, in whichever direction, whichever the religion is secondary, but you know, it's a very strong sort of contextualization of who they are, where they came from, and where they're going, yeah, in the astral self. And then there's those of us, and this is many here in the sacred self-healing community, because that is fundamentally what we're training here, who have the attachment to their conscious self, yeah, as sort of the direct connection to source or the divine. Yeah, so whichever level it is that you are, you know, that you need to feel most safe is also the level on which, and you guys are all confirming this right now, Andrea, you too, it's also where we worry the most. Yeah, we worry the most about that which we are most attached to. So I mentioned earlier that dark forces seek these worry energies, if you will, as an opening, as an entry into you. It's not that dark forces are necessarily out there and just wait for you to run in your trap. There's mechanics to that. I mentioned a few of them last time, and I'm going to summarize this here today. But it is important for us to understand, without sort of the details of it, that our worries or our fears, along, of course, with other forms of lower vibratory thoughts, emotions, sentiments, and actions, produce an energetic field around us. Yeah, they, here going back to Dr. Hawkins's calibrated levels of consciousness, yeah, that everything that we sort of define as below truth or ego, that these create an energetic field around us that works very similar to, if you will, magnetism. Yeah, can you all imagine that? Yeah, that just like how we have sort of positive and negative without the good and bad aspect to it, but just the charge, the energetic charge of it in physical energy. Yeah, physical energy on our planet is composed of two different charges. That's where the word duality comes from, or polarity. Now, polarity and duality are often used interchangeably because it is the polarity that creates the duality. Yeah, so when you have two poles, just like in electricity, yeah, there is an interaction that happens between those two poles in between, and that's what we call a field. And in that field, forces are at work, so that pull or push. So when we create a negatively charged field in us, then that creates a push. It pushes something. Yeah, it pushes something because there is too much of something. Yeah. And when we are positively charged, okay, there's too little, it creates a pull. It doesn't matter now how you see positive and negative, you have to let go of good and bad here when you're thinking about this is a pure scientific, physical science point of view. All right, but all I really want to drive home here is that you understand that there are mechanics at work that are very easy to measure. They're very easy to understand, if you understand a little bit of how these large and small forces, how they work in this universe, at least on the physical reality. So what we call the Newtonian paradigms, yeah, the laws of thermodynamics and the great and the small forces is something that is valid within the 3D reality. Yeah, so everything that has to do with magnetism and warmth and so forth. Those are all things that our scientists nowadays regard sort of as the reality, as the only reality. The problem with that is that there is actually a different reality that can only be experienced, that can only be felt rather than be measured. If we sharpen our tools enough, which we will at some point. Here, Dr. Hawkins has done some fundamental groundwork here as in measuring those energies. Yeah, like what are lower vibratory energies? What are higher vibratory energies? Yeah. So what do? They, in the first instance, even though they're in the immaterial, not the material physical, but in the immaterial, still have very similar dynamics and mechanics. Yeah, so if I am producing a low vibratory field because of worries, because of fears, because of anger, because of disdain, because of certain emotional states or certain energetic states that I am in, yeah, that I can, we can have obviously more than these states. Those are just sort of the headlines here. Yeah, there's a lot in between, obviously, but if I create a low vibratory field, then I am creating something. I'm pushing something away. And as I'm pushing something away, I'm pulling something else in. In the greater sense of cosmology, so to speak, the sum total of energy is neutral. Yeah, is zero, which means that if there's an imbalance in me, yeah, then that imbalance has an effect on the outside. It does something to the outside. It's like weather systems. I like the analogy with weather systems. When you have a low pressure area somewhere, yeah, where the air pressure is very low, it pulls in other things and pushes out the winds. Okay, so hurricanes, for example, are extremely dense low pressure areas. And in that, they are creating a huge push, yeah, a huge output. Okay, and I just used the word dense, and some of you may have seen the other way how I define these different realities by density. Yeah, so you denser something becomes, I guess you could call it, the more intense it becomes. Yeah, so this is a different way of looking at these different levels of reality. Yeah, by density level. So we have learned two things here right now. We have learned that there is dynamics and mechanics, meaning that there is something that creates sort of a push-pull, an in and out. Yeah, something that creates motion. Yeah, so there is currents. Yeah, think of it as weather systems, and that has to do with the charge. That has to do with the field that is created, yeah, by a specific charge. Okay, and then there is density. In other words, not every low pressure area leads to a hurricane, right? We can have low pressure and don't even realize it. Maybe we have a few more clouds, but that's it, and it just sort of zooms by and then it's gone. But when it accumulates, when it intensifies, when it congregates, aggregates, all right, when it gets denser, okay, then it increases in power. These are two fundamental mechanical or material laws of physics that also apply to energies in general. So now coming back to us as individuals, okay, and this is almost like a rhetorical question, but it's important to realize that when I have a little bit of fear, yeah, a little bit of fear, let's say, I just heard something in the news, or somebody just told me something that is concerning, okay, and for a moment I feel a little bit stressed out as compared to someone who's in a state of high levels of distress and anxiety. Which of these two people and their energy fields would you determine to be denser?
More, and what person who's more in anxiety?
Yeah, because it's much more intense, isn't it? And that's why anxiety can also take control of so many more body functions, if you think about it. So having a few fear thoughts going through your head, that can be disconcerting and it can throw you off, like Julian described earlier. But if you were anybody here ever had like a real panic attack, a real sort of anxiety attack? Anybody has this physical experience or knows
Yeah,
someone?
I have.
Okay, can you describe that to us just so that we can understand the density of this?
Well, the heart rate speeds up, the breathing goes quick, the body starts sweating, you can break out into a sweat. And you just feel like you've totally lost your center of gravity.
What happens to your heart, to your emotions in that moment?
Yeah, everything races and is intensified.
Okay, now what is the subjective feeling of it?
It's a physical, total physical body.
It's physical, but what does the physical state do to your emotions?
Oh, sends you into a spin.
Like
All emotions are intensified. Extreme fear.
extreme, like, oh my God, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Right? Oh my God, that's what's going to happen. Okay.
Just
And then
extreme feeling.
and then what does it do to you? What does it do to your thoughts? I mean, what I just demonstrated is, you know, more or less a thought, but what does it do to your thinking in that moment?
It's like a whirlwind. It totally messes up your thinking processes. You can't
Completely.
catch anything.
Yeah. So it's a physical state, okay, that completely messes with your emotions and with your thinking. What about the spiritual? Are you able to feel something like connection in that moment?
No, you can't, because you're totally caught.
Yeah. So when it comes to finding remedies for anxiety, and this is the reason why I've created this one slide here where I'm summarizing or grouping certain density layers in us. Hang on a second. I need my pointer back. Yeah. Our entire physical, emotional, and mental is hijacked. It's completely hijacked. That's why I summarize it. And in these graphs here, I've basically summarized it as ego self. Okay, because that is in that moment, yeah, the body mind, the 3D body mind, okay, is completely taken over by fear. At that point, it doesn't really matter anymore what started it, okay, because now that whole machine, if you will, yeah, is going 100 miles an hour. It's a hurricane. An anxiety attack is a hurricane to our ego self. It's the entire thinking, feeling, and acting is taken over, okay, and we are unable to make any kind of decisions. We are unable to function, okay, and the only remedy, yeah, the way to get out of that is to seek. Yeah, and this is something, Linda, that you mentioned, to trust, to seek something in you that is above that is above your body, above your emotions, and above your mind. Yeah, and this could be anything like, you know, believing in God, or believing in some kind of higher reality, or, you know, your soul self, your true self, your conscious self, something like that, because they stand over, that's a pay grade over your body, mind, and emotion. All right, so the thing with hurricanes, just like with anxiety, is that, you know, as the person slowly runs out of energy, yeah, so same with a hurricane, it runs out of energy, you know, it all resides and slows down. But the problem with that is that in those times of hurricanes, yeah, of anxiety attacks or any other kind of extremely dense distress, a lot of damage can be done. What are some of these damages that can occur? Not now in this extreme case of an anxiety attack, but in any of these kind of lower vibratory states, if they get very dense. What are some of your experiences? What kind of damage occurs in your life when you get pulled into these really strong lower vibratory fields in you? Let's call them just thunderstorms, maybe.
It challenges the trust and sets you out of balance.
Okay, that describes the symptom, but we're not talking about consequences. What are some of the damages that can occur when you're completely off balance, when you're completely off, especially on that level that is important for you? So in your case, Linda, it was, relationships, support system, people, community, feeling a sense of belonging, feeling a sense of support. When that is completely off,
Yeah,
what are
so that
some
it
what are
damaged.
some of the things you do then? What are the choices that you tend to do in such situations?
Isolation.
Okay, isolate. Okay, and does that help?
No.
No, right? It's the complete opposite, right? It does more damage, right? Because it's an exact juxtaposition to what you want. Okay, what else? That seems to be a mild form of damage, if you're asking me. Anybody here? What happens when you're in a complete, utter sort of
I,
emotional thunderstorm?
I personally have had these come on and not be fully aware of it. Like it just takes over my body and my nerves, and I wind up getting physically hurt.
Okay, yeah, not being aware of it, that's exactly what happens when we're not, when we're off balance. Okay,
Yeah,
that's if
yeah,
we
like
were
it
aware,
comes
if we were aware of it, we wouldn't be in that
on
situation. Hmm.
and then it sneaks in, and you're like, oh, I didn't know this storm. Didn't know this.
We have a bit bad connection here with you, Janet. You may have to repeat what you just said. You broke up, but you said something about before you broke up about you may get hurt, physically hurt. You were pointing out the physical hurt. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I can hear you now. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's not a fear of it. It's like actually.
No, it's just what happens. It's the phenomena. It's that's the symptom. Okay. So when you're completely off emotional and maybe also uh, physical, when you're disconnected, when you're completely disconnected there, okay, uh, physical harm, physical damage can occur in many different ways. I can relate to that. It's the same for me. It's usually the physical damage that occurs when I'm completely off. And yes, we're not completely aware of it. It's the same with Linda, wanting nothing more but connection and community. And then when the thunderstorm comes, we choose to do the opposite. We choose to isolate or push other people away. I mean, personally, when I get emotionally completely out of balance, I can be hurtful to other people's feelings. Now I can do damage to relationships. Luckily, I have good communication, so I can usually make up for that, but that can happen. Well, what can happen when we're sort of when we have a sort of a mental thunderstorm going on? When we can no longer discern truth, when we can no longer trust in our own perception, and we don't know what's true and what isn't. What's an example of a damage that can occur in our life?
Well, in that state, some really bad decisions can be made. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know the kind of remedy I use, and I'm definitely more aware of it. But it can really take us down a whole different path because we have mentally linked onto something that isn't the
Mm-hmm.
truth.
Yeah, like an illusion or something, right? We want it to be true so badly, we justify
Yeah.
it. We do, explain to ourselves why it's the best thing, and then we do something and it's really damaging for us, but we can't feel it at that moment. We can't.
Yeah.
We're disconnected from it. Yeah, that's one of the things Andrea says. You know, when she has this sort of mental thunderstorm state, she holds her breath. Now, what's the damage in holding the breath? What
This
happens if
too,
you,
this too is like you physically can start to shut off parts of your body. I mean, literally,
yeah, it can lead to
like
an anxiety attack, yes.
it can lead to anxiety attack, and
Mhm.
then also it's like I've noticed recently, I'm like, oh, if I really, I know we know about breathing, but the recent one that I've had is like, okay, I keep having this one digestive little issue here, and I'm like, am I breathing all the way down to that part of my body? No, it's shutting off the energy up in your head, so the rest of the body is just kind of dangling down. Sometimes energetically is what I perceive. There's
Yeah,
no
so
life there.
yeah, and this is only to demonstrate again the connection here between the body, mind, and emotion. We can no longer think properly, and we can also not feel properly. Yeah, so certain functions such as empathy or compassion, they don't work properly. Yeah, so body, mind, and emotion are intrinsically hardwired, and you guys know, most of you have enough knowledge in anatomy to understand that there's a nervous system, and there's glands, like your endocrine system, yeah, that produces neurotransmitters and hormones, and obviously also your cardiovascular system, yeah, the blood, the respiratory system that fills up the oxygen in your blood, etc. So there's a lot of human body systems that we have. Okay, they are all interconnected with one another, and they do affect our emotions, and they do affect our mental capacities. Okay, so the damage of being in any of these sort of physical, emotional, or mental thunderstorms is pretty much always the same. Yeah, that we make really bad decisions, that we cannot feel what is good for us, that we don't know what is true, yeah, and that we, you know, get pulled into uh, our lowest sort of survival instinct. So the body mind, and it's very important to understand here, the body mind, yeah, the physical, emotional, and mental taken together are extremely vulnerable in that way, because when one of them gets out of whack, yeah, when your thoughts go out of whack, your emotions and your body will follow. When your body goes out of whack, your emotions and your thoughts will follow. Have you ever noticed that? Anxiety, even though it's mostly felt on the physical and appears to create the biggest damage in the physical, is actually a mental imbalance. It originates in our thoughts. Now, certain trauma states can originate in the body, bypass the thoughts, and trigger emotional states without us being aware of it. And then the emotion creates a physical reaction, and the physical reaction triggers a mental reaction. So there's many different ways how this signal processing goes within us. And I don't want to distract you too much, because this is more part of learning how to master your body and your body mind. But I want you to understand that, because when you want to understand how dark forces work through you, you first have to figure out where exactly they're coming in. And then you're going to have to look at, why are they coming in there? So we just discussed the damage that can occur when we get out of whack, when we create this real low vibratory field around us. And I started this arc by saying that dark forces, just as light forces, by the way, go to these kind of, that's like magnetism, I said, they go to where they can find these fields. In other words, whatever kind of energetic state we're in and the field that we produce within ourselves, you know, in different and various degrees, which are the intensity levels, can either attract or repel dark forces, can either attract and or repel light forces. So how do you feel about that statement?
I agree with that statement.
Yeah, Janet, you
Feels
shared with us earlier that that you have already, due to your working with this, found out that there's a certain level of self-responsibility. And that's obvious that you then agree with a statement like this. Yeah. But let's dive a little bit deeper into this, because I don't think everybody agrees with that. What are your experiences with darkness? Let's start there. Does anybody here have experiences with darkness? And I'm not saying inner or outer. I'm not differentiating this at this very moment. Just in general, darkness coming over you.
there's so many different ways of this one. It is like I mean, one of the ways one of the ways is like I have certain dreams.
Okay.
At certain times in the morning, I'll wake up and go, what was that about? And it definitely didn't feel like uh, it wasn't like I've been taken off to the mountains and lake and there's a light coming down from the sky and, angels are singing to me. It's not some celestial thing. It is more like some sort of something more that felt like caught in the collective or somebody else's subconscious or something like that. And to me, they feel dark to me because they feel confusing. I don't feel like I've resolved something. I wake up and go, what was that about? Not fully in my consciousness of what was going on. And I go into that and it kind of link it to any past a few in ayahuasca ceremonies. Some of these experiences to me were dark places where I felt like there was no exit. It felt heavy.
Okay.
It was confusing. I had to know, it wasn't just like, oh, where am I? It was like a pressure and something that pushed me emotionally and mentally. The only way to get would be to be able to expand my own consciousness into something lighter. So these things are visually and in my feelings, to me, dark, a couple examples of dark experiences.
So I heard you talk about something like that some other people would maybe call demonic visuals, dark visuals, like seeing kind of demonic things.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, in energetic places that were gray or red and black,
Okay. So more
that
like in
kind of
form of
thing.
colors. That's the kind of visuals that you associate with that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and
So
one time was, I think I was in like some church, Catholic, something Catholic.
also
It
that was
was,
more like it's sort of a memory recalled, like picture,
um,
maybe from a movie or from an actual memory.
I don't know. It had something to do with the Catholic Church. I just remember a cross, big cross, and then all these people dressed in their robes of
Okay,
different,
symbols. Those
yeah,
are all
yeah,
symbols.
symbols of it. Yeah, yeah.
The other thing that you described that you described as something like sort of just collective stuff. Yeah, maybe collective emotions, residues of energies that weren't yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, we call them phantoms, or Carl Jung calls them phantoms. Okay, those are just, actually Aristotle was the first who called them phantoms. Yeah, those are sort of just things that fleet by. You know, they don't actually have a lot of impact on us. They're just sort of there, like shadows. You know, it's just stuff. You know, stuff. But we can feel that it's not really ours. Okay. All right. We're not judging anything. We're just exchanging experiences here. What are some other experiences of darkness? And you can use the slide. You can use those words here. You know, spirit beings, demons, ghosts, or dragons. Etheric dirt. You know, dirtiness. Yeah, ugliness, dirtiness. Or phantoms to describe this, because I know for some of you it's hard to find the right words. What are some other experiences with darkness that you've had?
I would say that darkness is around us all the time, even within my own darkness of like self-doubt is a form of darkness, and also people around us, and like Janet was saying, the collective. So it's there to bring about that push-pull that you were talking about. I do agree with that statement, that it's about bringing it back into balance. And if it's far out of balance, it takes a lot of energy to come back to center. And if it's only minor, like you were talking before, then it's not as dense. So it's like the density of where we're at is the darker things are, perhaps.
And what are your personal experiences with darkness? Different examples, maybe, of those different degrees of darkness that you just defined?
Well, for my own, like in my own inner darkness would be when I'm doubting myself, or I shut myself down or get conflicted. That is a form of believing and identifying with a part of me, probably that needs to come forward to be healed. But if I'm identified with it, I can stay stuck there. But my only way of
confusion, a form of confusion,
fog, and mental confusion. And then when I recognize, only through practicing, where I'm caught, when I can admit that I'm caught there and go, hang on a minute, this doesn't feel, I can feel when I'm not in my center or connected to my light. So back to the original question is, what disconnects me from my light and my center? It's a feeling that I have, that I can feel that something is coming forward to show me that I'm not balanced, or I'm not in that neutral state where I can actually observe. It's sort of like it's something for me to work.
So you're reflecting on inner darkness. So you are recognizing inner darkness because it shows you something, a part of you that you need to work on. Okay, in various degrees.
Self-healing. That self-healing aspect, yeah.
So,
and then
now, how do you know that needs to be healed? How does that feel like? What is the experience of that when you meet your inner darkness?
I feel that it's a conflict.
A conflict.
It feels, it's that schism, a confusion. When I feel in my center, nothing pushes up against that. Nothing. I feel centered, and I can accept things the way they are. I can view things, and I can see, well, that's not how. It's sort of like you can also know.
Feel lost. You feel lost at that moment. You don't know what's true, what isn't, what's right or wrong. Confused.
And that's when I know that, okay, something needs to come back into alignment here. Like, where am I? It's like,
So that's the self
feeling,
who learn you. Yeah, that has learned, who has learned
and
this, right?
that's that inner darkness. The outer darkness is understanding that the most of the outer collective conscious is actually unconsciousness acting out, and that it is a minefield out there, but it's okay, because whatever darkness is coming forward in the collective is actually just this exact process, but on a bigger scale, of it sorting itself out and darkness coming out. But I don't have to be affected by it, because I don't have to be a part of that collective. As soon as, if I can disentangle from it, because I've already worked through stuff myself, if I'm triggered by something that's in the outer, like the news or whatever happens, then I have to work on something within myself, because it's pulled me into
So
part of
you're
myself.
going into the fix with everything that you share. Let's just stick
Oh,
with what it actually is. So what are your experiences with darkness, outer darkness? You just mentioned when you hear something on the news, you experience that as outer darkness. How does that feel like? How does
yeah, because it pulls me out of my center and pulls me into fear. So if I have a fear reaction, or that it's got control over me right in that moment, it's caught me. I no longer have control. I feel powerless in that moment.
Okay, so that's something we can all feel. Yeah. So when you would you say there's a difference between when you call it an outer darkness to inner darkness? Can both create that kind of state of fear?
Yes, I would say so.
So you've learned to differentiate that as self-healer, and you've learned to take this as a signal and to look deeper into it, so that you know this, that whatever the attachment is or the fear underneath it no longer has this grip over you. Okay, that's the remedy. But we're really just here to talk about darkness itself. Yeah. So extreme fear, something coming in and you feel an extreme sense of fear. Jared, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I've had bucket loads of experience with darkness, inner and outer, but a couple that just sprung to mind were one when I was in my mid-20s and I had this really intense lucid state of a dream where I was viewing myself from the outside as like an onion. And as I started to peel the layers of the onion back, it just got darker and darker and blacker and blacker and blacker. And I peeled every single layer all the way to the core, and it was just, I was enveloped by darkness. And I had this realization that I was black to the core, like the blackest black that there could possibly be. When I woke up, I was filled with dread for like hours, you know, that entire day. It was just so, I was so flat and so I felt like I'd been damned, you know.
Okay, I was just gonna ask you what it meant to you. So you felt you were damned. There was some kind of spiritual darkness.
Yeah, it was like this overwhelming spiritual damnation, like I'd been damned to hell and there was no escape.
No escape. So a feeling of desperation.
Yeah.
Like no escape. There's no way out. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And then in terms of outer darkness, I've like, you know, I remember going to a Port Arthur in, it's like an old convict camp in Tasmania. And they had this black room in there. It was like where they used to put the prisoners in. It was just like a, you know, basically a big concrete box. And when you went into this room, like the feeling in this room was so thick. It was so powerful. Yeah, it was unbelievably dense. The density inside, I mean, it was just air in the room, but the density of the air in the room was, you could literally cut it with a knife. I've never felt anything as thick as it.
How did this make you feel? Oops, sorry.
And it brought up these feelings. I mean, I had a blacklight with me at the time. I remember this is years ago, and I remember shining the blacklight in there just to test it out. It made no difference whatsoever. I don't know what it did, but and it was just this. I mean, I couldn't go in there. I wouldn't go in there. I mean, I chose not to. I could have if I wanted to, but I didn't want to come out and bring anything back with me. You know, I didn't want to have any attachments or anything. So, but it was so intense. It was just not funny. But it was, again, that was that feeling of dread, and that wasn't necessarily damnation, but it was like this overwhelming feeling of intense dread and horror and madness. There was a madness.
A madness to it. Okay. Very good. Any other experiences with darkness, Jared?
Yeah, tons of them. So one time I was working for a Mormon lady, and nothing against the Mormons, and I don't mean to say, you know, them out or anything, but she was really dark, and she was running like an adventure camp, and she had a little house on the property, and I went into the house. She got booted out by the owners. I remember walking into the house, and in the center of her lounge room was like a vortex of energy, and it was so evil. Like, it wasn't the darkness of the dread that I felt when I saw the, you know, the core of the onion, the damnation that I felt, or the madness or the dread that was in that dark room, but it was just evil. It was like she had summoned this vortex of evil in her living room, or the vortex had arrived in her living room, you know, without having conscious.
Describe vortex. Do you mean this like a vortex, like a hurricane that's sort of
Yeah.
swirling and creating, or like a portal? What both, maybe?
It wasn't really swirling. It was more like a portal. It wasn't actually swirling.
Was there any kind of like
It felt,
magnetism?
yes, there was a pull towards it, definitely, and a push away. It was like, for me, it was like it had a repelling energy to it, for sure. But there was also like a pull as well. It was very strange, but it was so, it lacked the void of the dread was filled with pure evil intent, if that makes sense.
And like, as for you, were you afraid to get pulled in, or how did you see yourself in relation to it?
Oh, I just sort of watched it. I felt it, and I just, you know, I knew it was there, and there were other people wandering around the house, and it didn't scare me in the slightest. I just sort of, you know, was aware. I just walked out. I left, but it didn't frighten me at all.
Okay, so this is a very descriptive, a very visual, and a detailed sort of description of your encounters with darkness. Any other kinds or forms of darkness that you have encountered, or anybody else here, inner or outer darkness?
I mean, these experiences, I've had a few experiences with people who, especially, I guess, sort of recently, who see no problem with acting out because they're upset, or they'll, you know, make excuses, or, you know, the people who say, oh, go ahead and lie about this. I guess that these are all forms of kind of gaslighting in some ways, but also
Like, it's a form of coldness, right? It's a form of coldness that you're describing there.
yeah, and it's
Like
this
total lack
fact
of
that they're, go ahead, what?
total lack of empathy, like almost
Yeah,
inhuman, like no
yeah, like,
consideration for
I'm
somebody
going to act
else's.
this way. I know I'm acting this way, and I'm going to do it. And then you can either forgive me for it or not. I mean, it's just that flat out.
Deal with it.
Yeah. Like,
So
I was watching.
inhuman. So that's a really good addition here, because we forget this sometimes. So there's encounters with humans that we have sometimes that make us feel like there's some darkness there in that person. And you described a specific kind of darkness, and that's the coldness that we sometimes feel in people.
Yeah, you could see it come over their face. So one moment they're talking, and then all of a sudden, you know, like this one person was like, well, you better not get on my bad, or, you know, like, and, but, you know, when people get on my bad side, I just, I was looking at the person kind of shift into this little shriveled up person sitting there saying how they would be revengeful. To me, that's just darkness coming out of the person. It seems honest, but at the same time, it's, you know, it's like going into Harry Potter. All the dark people were happy to go around trying to kill people. So, and that's not good.
Any other experiences with forms of darkness in or out, or through people, through places, in dreams?
Yeah, no, I was dropping a guy home from a restaurant that I was working with at one point, and I dropped him at his house, and something told me, and he invited me in for a beer or something. I can't remember. I would have only been 18 or 19, I guess, at this time, and I stopped at the front door, and his wife kind of came to, a girlfriend or whatever, came to the front door, and she started saying something to me, and something felt really, really off. And he kind of moved away, and her face she just shapeshifted in front of me into a demon. Like her whole face completely changed form into this demonic thing. Like I was literally just looking at it. And, you know, I was 18 at the time, so I just sort of said, yeah, okay, thanks very much for coming, I'll see you later, and I walked away. So that was another one. And then there was one time I was in Peru on an ayahuasca ceremony, on a journey, and I'm laying on a mat, and as I came out of a space that I'd been in, I kind of sat up and I looked to my right, and the guy next to me was just complete, like there was a complete black lizard like superimposed over his body. I never actually, I couldn't feel any evil coming, or it certainly wasn't directed to me. It was more just an observation of what was
But you
happening.
saw it in your energetic vision.
Yeah, I could clearly see this complete lizard, like totally superimposed over the top of his body, like three times the size of his human body, and it was just black, this black lizard. Yeah.
In your case, Jared, most of your, if not all, descriptions are very visual. Very visual.
Yeah.
You know, you seem to have a tendency to visually perceive those things, whereas others have this more maybe in an emotional way, or in a kinesthetic way. They feel this more. They feel it in their bodies, or they feel it in their emotions, or in their heart.
Yeah.
It's an important distinction. It's something that I teach in the energy course, because not everybody perceives things with the same eyes, if you will, and there's no better or worse. At the end of the day, the goal is to harmonize all these different channels on which we can perceive things, so that we have this clarity that we need to understand ourselves and the energies around us. Yeah, those are pretty good sort of different areas of darkness here that you guys described from, you know, from within your own experience. Just as a counter question, does anybody have experiences with the forces of light? Yeah, the opposite. Spiritual experiences that are, you know, of the, I don't want to say positive, because there really is no negative or positive. It's just our interpretation and our like or dislike of certain things, but something extremely uplifting, miraculous, blissful,
So
empowering.
the first one of those that I can recall, Jona, was when in my early 20s, when I was a relationship that I was in was falling to pieces, and I was in a really dark place. It was the beginning of my spiritual journey, I guess. A karmic relationship that she was ritualistically abused by a satanic cult, and so I saw a lot of stuff there. There was tons of darkness there as well that I saw. But one celestial thing that I saw there was right at the end of the relationship. It was only 3 years. but I wouldn't leave. I was the White Knight back then, of course, and I was asking. We were laying in bed, and I was asking to be shown that she was going to be okay, to make it easier for me to be able to leave. And I saw this light in the. It was the morning, but I could see clearly in the corner of the room a light came through. It was like this angelic, beautiful, bright white. Again, it was a visual thing for me. And it just lit the corner of the room up, and in that moment I knew that it was okay to move on, and I left. And yeah, so that was the first one that I can remember. There's been several others, but
Almost seems like it works for you like a guidance system. You have a good reference, visual reference, that is, for something that could be described as a light, for, you know, like as you called it, celestial, you know, divine maybe, or source, you know, force, and something that comes from darkness. Any other experiences here within this group that that you would call, you know, something like the forces of light?
In one of my most desperate hours, I was living with the fruitarians in a concrete. I had a concrete floor with just a mat to sleep on, and my sort of newborn baby sleeping in a washing basket. And I was on the run from his father, who I was told had a gun, who was going to come and kill me. And I had nothing. And I remember it was close to Christmas, and I just basically was, my son had just fallen asleep, and I was in this total state of surrender. I was like energetically on my knees, asking, what, why? All I could think of was, I've got this beautiful little baby that I've brought into the world. What is going on in my life? How can somebody be wanting to kill us? And how can I be in this destitute situation? And I felt so low and powerless. And in that moment, I just surrendered everything. I really just wanted to know. I just was like, I just need something. And it was so amazing. All of a sudden, it was this light that streamed down onto me, into my heart. I could actually feel it and see it physically in the room. And it just nurtured me, and I could feel it in my heart. And it was coming from outside of me. It wasn't me that was doing it. And I heard, this sounds strange, but it sounded like celestial music or vibration. I could hear it, feel it. It was going through my body, and it was so beautiful. And I almost heard, well, I did hear it. It sounded like music, and it sounded like these voices, not just one voice, but male and female angels. And this is what they said, nothing profound. They just said, "It's all right, Julianne." And it was so clear, and I could just feel, and the whole room just lit up in light. And I just knew right then. And to me, that was an angelic experience, where in a moment of absolute devastation, I suppose, I was just done. I did not understand. And in that moment of needing something, that's what happened. And I have had other experiences a little bit similar to that, but that one, it was one that I really knew in that moment. And it shifted me. It just totally shifted me out of that state. And I knew I would, and everything did work. Everything was okay because it shifted my energy. It was like a download into my soul, connecting to me, to something greater than myself. And I knew that I was surrounded and protected.
Any other experiences with the forces of light?
One that comes to mind, and I take this as it was a force of light. When I had moved into studying holistic health counseling, after my daughter had broken out in a rash, and I wound up then taking these courses, and then was introduced in a class to this energy healer. And he took us through a meditation, and it was, basic meditation of grounding ourselves and then breathing light up through the ground. And this wasn't a huge, there must have been over 200 people in this room, but it was profound enough for me that for 3 days following that, I just could, it was around Valentine's Day too. I just felt so open. It was like I had taken some sort of drug. I felt like I had taken ecstasy or something for about 3 days. That I was functioning, going to work, but like if somebody I was on the subway in New York, somebody had a rose. I just kept seeing signs of love and hearts, and went off to. I remember at one work break, I went to the Gap and bought my kids, like, well, one child, and heart T-shirt from the Gap. I just remember this so profoundly because it was at that point that I was like, this is the direction I need to go. I eventually was in a healing group, energy group with him, and then was introduced to the Quickening, Stuart Wilde's book, and then we, catapulted me in this direction for certainly. So to me, that's a divine intervention. Yeah.
Okay, so something that is an internal feeling, really, that you're describing there, right? It's just like a technique, perhaps, that you've learned
It was
that
like it was
opened you to
definitely an inner shift that
an inner
had,
shift.
yeah, I felt light. I had no gauge really of distinguishing, but I kind of vaguely can remember now, like there was sort of a day when it went away. I remember the feeling of it kind of going, the energy dropping, but it was definitely a higher vibration existence for a few days.
Very nice. Any other types of encounters or experiences with light forces?
They come in during transmissions very often, and also just on my own meditating. Sometimes the freak, like I'll tap into my heart mind, and the frequency will go super high, and to me that's because the frequency is so much higher that I'm able to hold, in my day-to-day life. It seems so celestial. It seems so, from my vantage point, it seems so like it's the forces of light. And then there's other times during transmissions where it comes in and it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, it can be split seconds, moments of really moments, but they're so profound in their effect on us. Like you said, they do something to our energy. They do something to this sort of magnetic field around us, right? So
it's palpable.
So coming back to that original sort of visualization, that depending on the state that we energize or that we are holding or that we are asking for, so praying, asking for support, these kind of things are all techniques and activities, including transmissions, invocations, meditation, mindfulness, and so forth, that pull that in, right? That pull that in, yeah? So we are aligning ourselves. That's what the process of alignment is, to a higher vibratory field. And in that moment, we are beginning to attract that in. We are pulling this in. Okay, when we go into these lower vibratory places, we're pushing the light out. Yeah, so this is maybe a very simple way for us to remember how this actually works with these forces of light and dark within us. The question is, who's in control of that? Now, Jared, you just mentioned something. Obviously, when you meditate, when you do transmissions, those are all choices that even when you decide to consciously breathe, like Andrea mentioned earlier, Julianne, you know, those are all conscious choices. We're making a conscious choice right now that we need to remember something, or that we need to focus on something else, or that we, you know, need to look at something, or that we somehow, you know, sort of need to reorient ourselves, because in that moment, say, of desperation, yeah, we can feel how we're getting pulled lower and lower and lower. Those are remedies. Those are all the things that we practice here in self-healing. Yeah, but a big part of that, and Julianne, you were hinting at this earlier, a big part of that is understanding what is going on. Yeah, a big part of that is the literacy that we have with ourselves, knowing, yeah, what this feeling that we, or the thought that we are getting pulled into, or the sensation, what that's aligning us to. Yeah, yeah, the ability to even recognize what kind of state we're in. That is a huge part of sacred self-healing, because we have to form a roadmap. And here on the screen, you just see, you know, like a simple matrix of descriptors that are obviously not, you know, covering it all, but they give us somewhat of an idea of what energetic state we're in, and what these kind of energies are that we're pulling in, be it the light, the forces of light, or the forces of the dark. And it's a big part of self-healing, to have that awareness, to have the literacy, and to be able to make that choice, to master that, what we align ourselves to. Now, I want to go one step deeper now and ask you what your thoughts are on whether all darknesses, and we could also, you know, then apply this to light, come in from entities. Or is it just like I described it in this sort of neutral, mechanical way, that is just like weather systems? What do you think? What is your feeling? What's your intuition here? Yeah, Julianne, go ahead.
Sorry, Jona, what was the question? That it was darkness coming from entities?
I mean, you described, you know, your encounter with the forces of light. Yeah, those are all spirit beings, so whether they're dark or light. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you called them angelic. You described them. You know, you heard something, you saw something, and those are beings that you're describing there. Those are beings. They're not in physical form. Many of us can't even see them. Yeah, we can maybe feel the emotion that we have with it, or the sensations that we have with it, but don't see it. Here, Julianne and Jared, both very visual, and they've also trained this for a very long time. Yeah, the visual ability. But even without the visual ability, which is not, you know, really necessary for identifying dark or light, do you think that it's always entities this is coming from, or do you think that it's just sort of random fields. Are we up against a different intelligence here, like other beings that have a consciousness as well, be it transdimensional or 3D? Yeah? So when we have encounters with people, obviously we say, no, it's that person. When we have encounters with a transdimensional being, you know, spirit being, okay, well, we say it comes from that spirit being. Do you think it's always like that it's coming from some kind of being or consciousness? Or do you think that it is that there's a randomness to it?
I'm not sure that there's a randomness to it. And I don't think that it's all, I think some of it is definitely coming from entities, like a specific kind of consciousness. But to me, it kind of feels like those entities, those specific consciousness identities are coming from fields. That's how it feels to me.
Mm-hmm. So there's a connection there somewhere.
I would feel
Yeah,
too
yeah.
that sometimes, like, I've had experiences with entities and I've seen them, and I used to do house clearings and different things, and there definitely were forces, and there was, in one place there was a vortex, and the energy that came out of it, the entity that was there, definitely felt like it was darkness. But I think the question that I would feel into myself is that where does any of it come from? Like,
Yeah, it's a chicken or the egg, right? Was the field there
yeah,
first, or was the entity there first? Mm-hmm.
yeah. And the nature of darkness and light, that's like, well, if I just see things as dark and I just see things as light, that's going into duality.
Mm-hmm.
So if the darkness can become its own entity, and it can be totally focused on darkness, or that light is totally focused on light.
Mm-hmm.
So
kind of like that, you know. You see it as wind, right, with a hurricane. Yeah. Yeah, like say the wind is the entity that comes out of the hurricane, which is like a vortex. Yeah. So the vortex densifies it. And as it densifies, it becomes more like a being. Yeah. So it can be undefined. Yeah. And it's a little looser, and it doesn't really have a lot of structure. Yes. Say collective energies are very loose. Yeah. They're sort of just like global weather systems, you know what I mean? They just sort of swirl around. Yeah, there's a little more randomness to them, but they're not random either, because they are the outer expression of the sentiments and thoughts and you know, overall sort of energetic fields of the humans on this planet and the planet itself. Okay, so let's say if you have 1 billion people, these fields are less dense than when you have 8 billion people, right? I mean, there's a logic to that. Yeah, so one thing is obvious, that the more people are here that are exerting energy, yeah, the more these fields densify, the denser they become. That was just due to, you know, the quantity of it. Yeah. But you're on to something here, namely what happens when energies densify, they take on forms. Okay, so forms are something that in spiritual science are, say, regulated, yeah, by higher hierarchies. Higher hierarchies. So I just used the word transdimensional. In other words, you know, higher dimensional or multidimensional, whatever these words that are floating around here, different dimensions. So we live in 3D here. It's part of our awareness. Yeah, it's the awareness you and I are connecting with you right now through voice and technology, that is 3D. And we're confined to these 3D laws, X, Y, Z. That's 3D. Yeah, 4D being something like time and space, which our physical brain cannot process because it's a 3D tool. It cannot process anything that is beyond 4D. That's important to remember. We have a hard time. I'm the best example. I have a really hard time dealing with time zones. I don't know about you, but scheduling appointments with all different kinds of time zones is always a challenge. Yeah, because there's nothing in me really other than my ability to do math, okay, that helps me to understand this. Yeah, the fact that it's 11 p.m. almost here and that it's 11 a.m. or 6 a.m. or whatever, it's really hard for me to imagine. I can use my abstraction, yeah, my ability for abstract thinking, yeah, I can form a picture of that in my mind, but it does not actually take on form for me. Why is that? Because here in 3D, I'm not capable of that. That is not my domain. That is a higher spiritual domain. There's different kind of beings, yeah, that are responsible for form. In other words, anything that is beyond 3D, okay, is something that we would experience as an entity in some ways, okay, because that's the only way we can abstract it. Yeah, that's the only way our mind, yeah, our cognition can sort of relate to it. And psychology is kind of useful there, or neuroscience, because we know from all kinds of research that depending on, say, what kind of culture, ethnic background, and religious background a person is, the forms that they are giving these entities, they relate to their frame of reference. Now, when a person trains their spiritual vision, then they can also begin to perceive things that they have no frame of reference for, that bypasses, that doesn't use the physical brain, that it uses a different kind of perception within the person. It's what we call spiritual visioning or energetic perception. Now you can begin to see forms that you don't know what they mean. You have no reference for that. It doesn't really mean anything to you in as in like something like a knowledge or anything. You can't really relate it to anything, but you can still investigate it. You can experience it. You can feel into it, and you can form something like a roadmap, like a navigation roadmap for that. But fundamentally, the answer is yes, it does come from entities, but these entities, like, here in 3D, can also appear or have an effect in different density levels. So, it can just work on the collective unconscious, for example, which is, pretty powerful, but it is not directed. It can also work on just one person only. And then in cases of, infestation, for example, where you have a house or a place, really sort of what you guys called a vortex earlier, or, this thickness, okay, where these energies congregate, yeah, all the way to where you can have a possession, where a person's consciousness and body, mind, and entire sort of awareness is being hijacked, okay, by a specific, very defined entity. These entity in cases of true possession, these entities can always identify themselves with name. It is something that I mentioned before, that when you are facing darkness, that can give you power over, what you're dealing with. Yeah, this is something that I don't want to go deeper into, but understanding darkness and the different forms of it and the different names of it is something that I wanted to give with this webinar here as, you know, something like a navigation map for you. Why? Because when we understand something better, we fear it less. Yeah, this is a function of our ego mind. Yeah, so coming back to something that Linda mentioned in the beginning, you know, the fear of not knowing, the fear of the unknown. The fear of the unknown is fundamentally what corrupts the connection with the light. Yeah, and there's many different reasons why we're experiencing this here, why we're experiencing this psychic stress as, you know, spirit beings, as souls are spirit beings incarnated into this lower dimension. Yes, 3D, that's a lower dimension as our spirit being operates in. There's a reason for that, but basically why we are, you know, faced with this unknown, yeah, is something that has to do with darkness. So the darkness is fundamentally the unknown versus the light is, you know, the known. It's the very thing that we sometimes call force or spiritual or the divine intelligence that has brought everything into existence. Yeah, that has brought every being into existence and also consciousness itself. It is pure consciousness. Yeah, the Holy Spirit, if you will, if you're Christian. Okay, so that is clearly an entity. Okay, that is an intelligence. It's just so far, you know, up the ladder dimensionally that is it's inconceivable for us. We do not have a reference system for that. We don't have any form. We work with abstractions. And so when we're like 4 years old and we're being told that there is a God that has created the universe, then we think of this old bearded man in a cloud somehow, and Jesus as you know, his son that came to bring love to all humans. And these are abstractions. Okay, we have to understand here that when we're talking forces of light and forces of dark, we're fundamentally talking about entities. We're talking about consciousness behind that. Okay, and so if we want to feel equipped, yeah, in dealing with that, we have to look into the nature of darkness. And in part 2, nature of darkness, part 2, I pointed out the duality of darkness, and I mentioned that there's a third kind of darkness. All right, so I want you, and this is why we talked about fields and all this, because you have to understand these different kinds of darknesses as fields. We have these two big fields here, yeah, that are influencing our perception, that are influencing, you know, whether we see something as light or dark, whether we feel light or dark, whether we feel confused or clear, whether we feel, you know, aware of ourselves, who we are, why we came here, and what the meaning is of all of that. And yeah, like Linda, like you said, trust, yeah, that it is the way it is, and it's perfect the way that it is. So these two main darknesses that we're dealing with, named the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic. Okay, I described them in part 2, and at the end I added another dimension to it. I said, and now in recent years, okay, in recent years, I'm talking about the last 4 or 5 years, we are now dealing with the densification, which means with an ever stronger growing new form of darkness that is emerging out of these Luciferic and Ahrimanic forces, separating more and more. In other words, we have something that is arising now here, okay, that apart from, you know, the fear and the deception and the untruth and the materialism, yeah, the avoiding death and seeking more control, the rationalism, yeah, everything is sort of reduced to its material 3D value, yeah, but at the same time also pulling us into this meaninglessness, yeah. In other webinars, I described it as getting lost inside yourself, yeah, you're getting lost in, you know, the material of you, okay, and the other form, the Luciferic, being, you know, the light bearer, the light seeker, you know, the fallen angel of, you know, the actually, you know, the one that was supposed to hold the light, and it goes out there and tries to build a new kingdom, a better world. Yeah, it's the delusion, the escape, the externalizing, trying to find, you know, a better reality elsewhere. Yeah, there's also, you know, our reality is creating all kinds of delusions and confusions, and this usually comes in through temptation, yeah, versus harmonic forces come in through fear and deception. Temptation, compulsions, you know, all these transgressions and sins, you know, that's all in the Luciferic. Yeah, and most of that leads back to us externalizing the source of light, yeah, seeing it outside of ourselves. It's very important to understand that when you're dealing with darkness, that you understand what the actual fear is all about. That's why we discussed this here in detail. Yeah, and also what this leads to. So when you see the light outside of yourself, when you externalize the light, then you will inevitably also feel a victim of that. And when you internalize the light too much, when you pull too much inside and try to control, you know, every single aspect of your life, because you are basically then declaring yourself as the light, okay, you can get reduced, or you reduce yourself to it, because there is nothing left after the 3D. Yeah, so this is how these two main sort of dark forces here, the duality of darkness works on our ego, yeah, and how it pulls us into all that we associate with egotism and narcissism and so forth. So both of these forces can lead to narcissism. The fundamental belief underneath both of them is that God made a mistake and that there is something that needs to be fixed. So basically ego over God, that is the darkness in us. That's how darkness gets a foothold in us. Something is not right, and that is taking over control. Yeah, and then you have, you know, sort of these two main coping mechanisms. Yeah, half of people go into avoiding pain and seeking pleasure, and the other half goes into avoiding death and seeking control. And you also have mixtures thereof. This new form of darkness, this new densification that we're dealing with here, which I defined as etheric forces, is a higher dimensional form of darkness, which rejects the spirit being altogether. It rejects, yeah, the existence of consciousness altogether. And it manifests in people in rejecting that they have a soul. Yeah, that they're not. There is no such thing as a soul in them. And in that, you know, they're reducing themselves and dehumanizing themselves, yeah, as they're degrading the force that brought them into existence. Now, these etheric forces, they do this with the deliberation, and there is often black magic involved. So all the things that you see here now emerging, what they call satanic, it's satanic is mostly here geared toward harmonic forces. it's worse than that in a way, and you don't need to be afraid of it. You just need to understand it, because it really is after, you know, basically killing the source of it all and replacing it. Yeah, assuming, you know, the place of like a usurper, you know, like assuming the divine force itself, whereas the harmonic is after your etheric and the luciferic is after your light. Okay. You see DNA and blood here because that is how it's also manifesting in us. So this belief that you know, we are all just DNA, and we discussed this last time, nature versus nurture, that we are just, you know, that everything is predisposed and predetermined, and this is also part of this whole sort of space alien religion that is forming right now, you know, that we are the result of some kind of genetic experiments and so forth. That is how you can identify this. So anybody who propagates, you know, these origin myths, you know, around aliens, you know, like 3D materialized aliens came to this planet and made it with, you know, this sort of primitive form of humans in order to speed up the consciousness development of humans, is fundamentally caught by these forces, because that diminishes any kind of natural and organic evolution that is taking place here on this planet for many, many, many years, many more years than just, you know, what we see as sort of prehistoric history. Okay, so this evolution of a human, you know, is going on for many millions of years. And that is an expression of the divine nature, okay, that the planet Earth carries in it as a seed, as a logos, if you will. So we are in that fundamentally the expression of this planet. And there is something extremely powerful in us, because we have something like an I am awareness. So because we can, you know, go into our consciousness and override our nervous system, we can override our you know, thoughts and our emotions and even our physical pain. Yeah, we can actually co-create, we can co-manifest. I hinted at that last time. I said this is when you understand the nature of darkness, you also understand the nature of manifestation. All right, because right here, okay, is the whole point. What are these dark forces after? Okay, why are they hindering? Why are they putting themselves in the way of humans further developing their own I am awareness, their own consciousness? And that is something that we will then finalize in the next alien discussion, because that is something that needs to be understood in context with these current narratives around the human origin story, yeah, the history of human consciousness development, because that is something that these etheric forces are now after. Okay, and that's very important to understand. And some of you may see something here if you look at DNA and blood. You know, there is something extremely dangerous about believing that, you know, you could just sort of implant or inject some kind of thing and then it would increase your consciousness level. This is where humanity is headed right now, in you know, through the perspective of, or seen through the lens of darkness. Now, seen through the lens of light, nothing is going to stop the organic natural development of human consciousness. Yeah, so it's going to happen no matter what. That's why the light always wins. Okay, it is the creator of it. Yeah, it's the intelligence behind all that is with consciousness, okay? And therefore, you know, we don't really need to worry about this. We just need to understand that each era and each, you know, different epoch that we are in comes in with a new challenge. And as we are now evolving in our consciousness, which is this global awakening, we're uncovering, you know, the deceptions, the illusions. Yeah, we're uncovering the stuff that is working against truth, that is working against freedom. Yeah, here through externalizing our powers, you know, just, you know, mentioning mandates and things like that. So, you know, these governing bodies are assuming more and more control. Yeah, so you got to understand that these are all things that are happening right now, but at the same time, we are also growing in consciousness and becoming more and more aware of it. Now we have to become aware of this third force that is coming in, attacking our ability to connect with our light. And there is a lot of discussion about, you know, whether the vaccines are, you know, stopping your consciousness, if they're, you know, whether they are stealing your soul and stuff like that. That is not the case. But what is the case is that when you disconnect a person's, you know, ability to feel their own I, yeah, to feel their own spirit being within themselves, you are also disconnecting them from, number one, the powers within that person that can catapult them out of these dark places. Yeah, so you're taking away their own self-healing powers. Okay, and on the other hand, you're making it a lot harder for that person to even be able to discern them. You confuse them to a point where they're not able to make choices that gear them to with the light that is pre-programmed in them. Okay, but because they're being so taken over by these dense and dark fields, they can no longer feel this. The result then is that a person that is totally overcome with these dark forces, yeah, here, like where they all come together, is that they are denying their own humanness, that they are willingly giving up, yeah, their soul in a way. And we will clarify this with the alien discussions number 3, yeah, and go a little deeper into the process of how that is being propagated nowadays. Here for today, I want to thank you for so openly sharing and helping us all to understand the force of light and the forces of dark a little better. And you know, we're going to go and talk about these dark forces. They need to be named. They need to be familiarized. We need to understand them so that we can lose the fear of them, and so that we can learn what it is in us, what these powers are in us that can inoculate us, that can, you know, make us become immune to them because we understand what we're dealing with. So these higher levels of consciousness that we're moving into, guys, are states in which we understand it better, what we're dealing with, as opposed to, you know, in previous eras here in our recent history, where, you know, it was kind of like all just fuzzy, and we depended on, you know, this sort of spiritual input that came in from the forces of light. So as we are growing up from, you know, spiritual children into spiritual teenagers, we are now beginning to understand the concepts of these forces that are working here with us. Okay, and that means that we are becoming capable of higher levels of discernment, but it also means that we need to exert more disciplines. We need to actually inform ourselves about these things. We need to learn these things. So we can't just go in there and experience it, because without a reference system, yeah, we don't actually know what's happening to us. So this is the good news here, is that you guys are already on this path to learning to discern all these things within you. And even if some of these topics that we talked about today, for example, are a little frightening because they are deriving around the unknown, it is exactly through these kind of discussions that you gain more clarity, more power, and ultimately become able to master your will, and with that, your body, your emotions, your thinking, and your choices. So let me just say one more sentence. Forces of light, forces of dark cannot do anything to you, but they can manipulate you in a way that you give up your free choice, that you give up your humanity, that you give up your soul, that you give up your love, that you give up your truth. And it happens exactly how you guys described it, namely through these internal experiences, yeah, that you called inner darkness, yeah, but that are fundamentally, you know, the inner experience, yeah, of an outer darkness. So with that, I think I'm going to close here tonight, move on to the Daily Sacred Self thread, to the study group. And there we can discuss this maybe a little bit more if you'd like. The study group is there for us to increase our understanding of these kind of things. I want to discuss especially the mental effects, yeah, on our psyche and also the current collective energies, namely the psychic stress that we're experiencing right now. So thank you guys very much and see you very soon.